Hi, boys and girls. Um, Sorry this is a little bit late today. I want to recap Detectives in Togas. So, at this point, Caius is still a dumbbell. He's hiding out at his home. We know that Rufus has been taken to prison, which is not good. Back in this time, it would not have been a good place for a young boy to be. Remember, Rufus's dad is a general, and all of this probably ties in somewhat to that. And then we have the boys who are trying to find out what's going on. We have Antonius, the one who believes in ghosts and loves criminals, and we have Julius, who knows about the law. Mucius, who's kind of the leader, tells everybody what to do. And we have Publius, our fast runner, who is always making it to the destination before anyone else. And Flavius, who is afraid of everything. So, Rufus's mom, Livia, she's just beside herself because Rufus is now incarcerated, which means he's in jail. He's been arrested. And so they have just been to Rufus's room and found the sopping wet clothes, and Mucius's his lantern is missing, and they don't understand why the lantern is missing. So this is chapter 10, called The Hole in the Wall. As Livia and the boys came back to the hall, Rumpus, a handsome young man, came joyfully toward them with the words, "I bring good news, mistress." "Tell me," Livia asked eagerly, and it was evident from her expression that she was thinking of Rufus. "Our master has won a great victory," Rumpus reported. "The latest edition of the newspaper was hung out just as I was crossing the forum. Our master has defeated the rebellious Gauls." They're from France. "And there is great rejoicing in the city." The boys were delighted, and the slave girls crowded around Livia, congratulating her. "Now everything will be well, mistress." "Excuse me," one of them said. "Rufus will be released immediately. I'm sure of it," Mucius said happily. "Rufus released?" Rumpus asked. In the excitement, no one had told him about Rufus's arrest. "I fear not," Livia said to Mucius, and he realized that she would rather have had news about Rufus than about her husband's victory. She started to say something more, then reconsidered and sent the slave girls out. Rumpus alone was permitted to remain. She sat down, beckoned the boys to gather around her, and said in a low voice, "The emperor is jealous of my husband, who is adored by his troops. You know that the emperor insists on being worshipped as a god, and he will not stand for any rival gods. The prefect of the city is ambitious and is now more likely than ever to mete out harsh punishment to Rufus as a way of pleasing the emperor." So basically, she's afraid that because the emperor is jealous of her husband, the general, that the prefect of the city, the one who kind of controls everything, is going to take it out on Rufus now that he's in prison. The boys nodded intelligently. It was an honor to be told such political secrets, but there was a certain amount of risk in it too. It was extremely dangerous to make any slighting remarks about the emperor. Flavius looked anxiously around to make sure that no one was eavesdropping. Rumpus could contain himself no longer. "What has happened to Rufus, mistress?" he burst out. "Rufus is in prison," Livia said. Rumpus paled. "In prison?" he breathed, horrified. Livia told him what had happened. Then she asked sternly, "Where was Rufus last night? Why are his clothes soaking wet?" Rumpus fell to his knees before her, stammering, "Oh, mistress, it is my fault. I should have stopped the boy." "So he was out after all," Livia murmured. Where did he go? How? When did he slip out? Rumpus looked penitently at his mistress. Rufus had already left school last night when I went to fetch him. These young gentlemen told me he had not felt well and had gone home. We only said that because we didn't want to tell on Rufus about Xantippus, Flavia said. I hurried home, Rumpus continued, but Rufus was not back yet. He arrived half an hour later. Why did you fail to come and tell me? Asked Livia. You were ill, mistress. There were strict orders not to disturb you, Rumpus replied. But why did he come so late? Livia asked. He would not explain, mistress, Rumpus said. He looked very downcast, did not answer my questions, and went straight to his room. I was worried by his behavior and watched him through an opening in the curtain. I wondered why he did not take off his cloak, for his supper was standing ready for him. He took tinder and flint and lit his lantern, and when he did so, I noticed that it was not his lantern. That was mine, Mucius put in. Then he emptied his money box, Rumpus continued, pouring the money into a small bag. It occurred to me that he intended to run away. But I did not stop him immediately because I was curious to see how he would go about it. I decided it would be useful to learn his tricks, and so I hid myself. That was a piece of stupidity on my part. I should never have let him out of his room. He came out and sneaked through the hall into the garden. I followed close behind. In the garden, he raced across the lawn toward the boxwood hedge. Some bushes. Jumped over it, and he suddenly disappeared. At that, I really began to worry. I ran after him, but it was already too late. I was alarmed to find a hole in the wall that we never knew anything about because it was overgrown with ivy on the outside and concealed by the bushes on the inside. The hole was too small for me to squeeze through. All I could do was stick my head through and shout after him, Rufus, stop, stop, Rufus, come back at once. But he paid no attention to me and continued on into the woods. I had to run all the way through the house to the entrance and have Titus open the door for me. I lost so much time that Rufus was out of sight before I started after him. I searched for hours but could not find him anywhere. When did he return? Livia asked. He was gone all night, Rumpus replied guiltily. All night? The boys and Livia exclaimed in one breath. He only returned home this morning, shortly after sunrise, Rumpus said. Where had he been? Livia asked anxiously. He refused to tell me, Rumpus replied. He looked utterly worn out, was no longer wearing his cloak, and had not brought back his money, or the lantern. What worried me most of all was that he was soaked to the skin. I insisted on his telling me where he had been, but he refused even to speak to me. Finally, I threatened to go to you, mistress, whereupon he became very excited. He grasped my arms and cried out, If you do, my father will be lost. What in the world did he mean by that? Livia asked. That I don't know, mistress, Rumpus replied, but his despair seemed so genuine that I believed him. You must not betray me, he pleaded. Nobody must know where I have been, not even my mother. It would bring misfortune upon us all. He begged so hard that I finally gave him my word not to tell. If I had only guessed these dreadful consequences, mistress, I certainly would have come to you. Perhaps he would have been able to save him. I could have helped him to escape in time. We could have gone to the country together and hidden. Rumpus fell silent. He sat and stared woefully into space. It is too late for that now, Livia said. I ought to be angry with you for neglecting your duty, but you acted in good faith. We must all work together now to help Rufus. But how many riddles there are! Above all, I can't see how my husband can be involved in this thing. If only we could find out where Rufus was last night. We could visit Rufus in prison and ask him, Antonius proposed. Rumpus shook his head gloomily. We would not be admitted, he said. Besides, prisoners are strictly forbidden to talk. He must have been hiding out in Minerva Square, Publius said. It wouldn't take him all night to write Caius is a dumbbell on the wall, Julius objected. And how do the lost cloak, the wet clothes, and the money fit in? Mucius pondered. Maybe he used the money to buy red paint, Flavia suggested. Oh, bosh, Mucius said. After sundown, there's not a shop open in all of Rome. Something tells me that Rufus fell in with evil companions last night, Livia remarked thoughtfully. There is no other explanation for his behavior, and for his staying away so long. Somebody forced him to write Caius as a dumbbell on the sacred temple, perhaps with the intention of blackmailing my husband. Perhaps there are other political motives behind this business. If we had some proof that Rufus was forced to do it, the prefect would have to release him. We must try to find this blackmailer, or whatever or whoever he is. It seems to me that the man into whose hands Rufus fell must be the same person as the man who assaulted the teacher Xanthos, Rompus said. These two incidents in a single night, there must be some kind of connection. If only there were some way to find the scoundrel, Livia murmured, but we haven't the slightest clue to go by. The chain, Antonia suddenly shouted. What chain? Mucius asked. The chain you have in your pocket. It belongs to the burglar, doesn't it? Oh, that, Mucius murmured. So he took the chain out of his pocket. Livia and Rompus examined it curiously. A valuable chain, Rompus said. High Oriental officers wear such chains on their cloaks. Perhaps the robber is a Persian general, Antonia said thoughtfully. More likely it was stolen from the cloak of a Persian general, Publius suggested. I'm afraid the chain is not much help, Livia said. I have an idea, Mucius exclaimed. What is it? The other boys asked. Lucos, Mucius said, his voice lowered almost to a whisper. Lucos? Yes, Mucius said. He has second sight. After all, let us go to him, show him the chain, and have him say who it belongs to. Now, Lucos, second sight means they can tell the future or tell the past, or kind of like a fortune teller, somewhat like that. Antonius was overwhelmed. Well, that'll be exciting. Livia also thought the idea good. This Lucos is supposedly really to have second sight, she commented. I've heard the most highly placed people say so. But Julius and Publius and Flavius maintained an embarrassed silence. Are you scared of him? Mucius challenged. Go on, Publius murmured. Why should I be scared? Julius scratched himself behind his ear. Oh, I'm not scared either. I'm not scared at all. Nope, I'm not scared, said Flavius. All right, chapter 11 is called Snakes. Oh, snakes. Oh, me, oh, my. They met in Minerva Square 2 hours later. The weather had turned foul. It was chilly, and dirty gray rain clouds were scudding across the sky. Flavius' teeth were chattering. He had drawn the hood of his cloak far down over his ears. Perhaps his shivers were due as much to the thought of Lucos as to the cold. Antonius showed them a small dagger he had concealed in the folds of his toga. Just to be on the safe side, he remarked mysteriously. He then made a great show of hiding the weapon under his toga again. You act as though Lucos were dangerous, Julius said nervously. Well, he might try to put a spell on us. After all, Antonius said. In that case, your dagger won't be any help at all, Julius replied. A dagger always comes in handy, Antonius insisted. Odysseus put out the Cyclops' eye with a dagger. That was a sharpened stake, Julius said. We might take a stake along then, Antonius offered. Mucius urged them to get moving. We must be back home before the doors are locked for the night, he reminded them. Have you got any money with you? Julius asked. Why? Mucius was taken aback. Lucos won't prophesy for nothing. I haven't a single copper with me. Antonius and Publius were also penniless. Mucius was furious. We should have thought of that before, he reproached the others. All I have is my regular pocket money, 35 sesterces. That's all I own. It'll cost more than that, but maybe we can owe him the rest, Flavius suggested. Or we can tell him to send the bill to Livia, Julius said. No, Mucius said, Lucos won't use his second sight unless he sees money right under his nose. We can't waste time either because Rufus has to be rescued as soon as possible. Who knows what he may be going through right now in prison? It's horrible in prison, Antonius said. They chain the prisoners up and give them only bread and water. Rats run over their faces and they're beaten too. I once passed by the prison and heard some awful screams. How much money do you fellows have at home? Mucius asked firmly. That was an embarrassing question. Not much, Publius murmured. I have a gold piece my uncle gave me for my birthday, Flavius admitted. Pleased, Mucius patted him on the back. Fine, he said. That's 100 sesterces already. What about you? He asked Julius. I saved a little, Julius stammered. I wanted to buy the collected works of Julius Caesar. They cost 300 sesterces. I've saved up 200 already. Then you'll have to donate 100 of them. Mucius decided generously. Julius sighed. In resignation. Okay. I can borrow something from our cook, Antonius said quickly. We have a famous cook who comes from Gaul. My father paid a fortune for him. Run and get the money, Mucius ordered them. I'll wait here for you. Flavius, Julius, and Publius returned in short order. Julius brought his 100 sesterces, Flavius his valuable gold piece, and Publius a heap of small copper coins. Antonius arrived a little while later with a long face. His cook had proved to be a disappointment. What a skinflint, he complained. He wouldn't give me anything at all. He held up a round cheese, broke it into pieces, and offered a piece of each to them. I don't want cheese. I want money, Mucius said. I have some money too, Antonius replied. I asked my father for an advance on my allowance. He happened to be home and was in a good mood on account of Praetorius's victory over the Gauls. Here's 50 sesterces for you. He says as gracious as Jupiter in person. Buy yourself figs and honey. You know what? For this money we could get a whole barrel full of figs. This money doesn't go on food, Mucius said, taking the coins. He gathered all their contributions and wrapped the coins in a clean handkerchief. We now have 297 sesterces. That ought to be enough. After all he has to do is look at the chain and tell us who the burglar was. That should not cost too much. They set off and half an hour later turned into Broad Street. The closer they came to Lucos's house, the deeper grew the silence among them, like a patrol nearing enemy lines. When they reached the big door, which they had often stared at with such curiosity, they stood indecisively for a while. Across the street was their school, and they regarded it almost with affection. I hope Xantippus doesn't see us, Flavius said. He's lying in bed and groaning over his leg, Publius said. Don't you think we ought to do something about getting in? Julius proposed. Mucius nodded in agreement. I'll knock, he said. And he began drumming his forefinger against the door. When nothing happened, he knocked again. Still nothing stirred, and Publius began pounding his fist against the door. And the door opened. Oh, wait, I missed something. Finally, Julius and Antonius took part, kicking vigorously with their sandals against the thick wood. And when all this had no effect, Mucius tried the latch on the door, and the door opened. It had not been locked at all. A few feet beyond it, however, was another door. So they opened one door, there's another door. This was bound with strips of iron and had neither lock nor latch. Halfway up the door was a square pane of yellow glass, and the boys peered curiously through it. Each in turn staggered back in terror, because behind the pane of glass, a frightful, grimacing face, illuminated by a greenish light, was staring at them. That's Lucos, Flavius gasped. They waited anxiously for a while, but nothing stirred. Finally, Mucius peered through the glass once more and said, It isn't Lucos, it's only a mask. What a horrible mug, Julius said. What's the idea? It's supposed to scare away evil spirits, Antonius said. It would scare away even the good ones, Publius grumbled. Here's a ring beside the door, Antonius noticed. It must be there for a reason. We'll pull on it, Mucius suggested. When Antonius pulled the ring, so there's a ring, like a little circle, like a, I'm talking about a ring, circle ring. You pull on it, okay? and there sounded from somewhere deep inside the building a quivering bell tone, like a sigh from the world of shades. "What a gruesome noise," Julius murmured. Suddenly the door flew open without a sound, as though moved by ghostly hands. The boys stared, but there was no one in sight. "He opened it by magic," Antonius whispered. Before them stretched a long, dark corridor. Back of the yellow pane of glass in the door hung a wooden box to which the mask was fixed. It was lighted by a small oil lamp with a green shade. "That's clever," Julius whispered. "What do we do now?" Publius asked. "We'd best stay here at the door," Flavius recommended. "I see a curtain back there," Mucius said. They walked slowly down the corridor as far as the curtain and then hesitated in front of it. There was a faint, moldy smell. "Well, what are you waiting for?" "Oh, well, what are you waiting for?" A hoarse, unfriendly voice called out abruptly. "Come in!" The boys started in fright, but automatically obeyed. Mucius pushed the curtain aside and went right in. The others followed him in uneasily. They found themselves in a large, vaulted room only dimly illuminated by a flickering fire in a fireplace. The bare walls glistened damply and were completely windowless. All around stood high columns, their tops lost in deep shadows. From each column hung a grinning mask as ugly as the one behind the front door, and all the masks were illuminated from within so that they looked like many horrid ghosts. The soothsayer sat behind a large table with his back to the fireplace, and he stared at the boys in silence. He looked even eerier than they had imagined him. Long, dirty yellow hair fell in tangled strands down to his shoulders and over his forehead as far as his eyes and his face. His face was strangely painted. The upper part of his face was white. From his mouth down, it was painted black, so that the top of his face seemed to be detached from his body. He wore a long black cloak embroidered with silver stars, and in his left hand he held a ball of polished metal which reflected the glow of the fire. I have a picture. That is Lucos. My. "Come closer," Lucos said hoarsely, lisping. The boys edged up to the table, which was heaped with writing tablets and yellowed parchments. Their eyes fell on a sharp, short sword, which filled them with distrust. But they were disturbed most by a basket filled with writhing snakes. Lucos scrutinized the boys with small, cunning eyes, which seemed to them somehow full of hatred. "What do you want?" he asked. Mucius hastily thrust the chain into Julius's hand. "You talk better than the rest of us," he whispered. "You speak to him." Taken by surprise, Julius laid the chain on the table. He kept a respectful distance from the snakes. Good day," he said politely. "We hoped you could tell us who this chain belongs to. There was a burglary at the home of our teacher, Xanthippus, and we would like to know who the burglar is, because Rufus, our friend, has been arrested. You see, we are Rufus's friends, but he is innocent, and that is why we have come to you. We have heard that you know everything, so perhaps you can help us." Julius fell silent and gazed hopefully at Lucos. But his speech seemed to have made no impression. The soothsayer stared intently at the chain and did not say a word. The boys did not know whether he had gone into a trance or just fallen asleep with his eyes open. So Julius cleared his voice. "We have an idea the chain belongs to the burglar. So we would like to know what his name is and where he lives. That should not be a hard job for you, should it?" Still Lucos did not reply. He closed his eyes and remained silent and unmoving. It was uncannily still in the room. The boys could hear nothing but the low crackling of the burning sticks of wood in the fireplace. "Maybe he wants his money first," Publius whispered. Julius summed up his courage once more. "We will pay, of course," he said to Lucos. "What will it cost for you to use your second sight for us? We have money with us." The effect of these words was startling. Luco sprang to his feet. He was much taller than the boys had imagined, at least a head taller than Publius, who was lanky and big for his age. Pounding the metal ball on the table, the soothsayer thundered, "Get out!" The boys were stunned. "Get out of here, you shameless brats!" Luco screeched, and suddenly his hand flashed into the basket, and he threw the wriggling snakes at them. The boys screamed with terror. They all ducked at once, and luckily the knot of snakes flew over their heads. A single snake became detached from the rest. It had hit Flavius in the face, bounced off, and fell to the floor, where it wriggled right side up, raised its head, and hissed at the boy. Flavius almost fainted with shock, but seeing his friends making their escape from the room, he uttered a piercing cry for help, "Help!" and he flew after them. As if pursued by the Furies, they raced down the long corridor, squeezed through the two doors in a body, and ran down Broad Street almost all the way to the Forum. They did not stop until they reached a public fountain, where they greedily drank the cool, clear water flowing from the mouth of a stone lion. Gradually they became calmer. Julius finally said, panting, "I guess Lucos took a dislike to us." "We escaped death by a hair," Antonius said. "Magician or not, he has no right to throw snakes at people," Publius complained. "They must have been poisonous," Antonius said, leaning over the edge of the fountain for another drink. But suddenly he straightened up with a cry of anguish. "Oh, help! A snake has bitten me! Help!" He writhed and twisted convulsively while the others stood helplessly around him. Suddenly something fell to the pavement with a ringing sound. It was the dagger he had hidden. During their wild flight, it had slipped down under his toga, and as he stooped over to get a drink, it had pricked his stomach. Publius and Julius roared with laughter. Antonius, too, was enormously relieved and able to appreciate the joke. Flavius alone remained silent. He could still feel the horror of the damp, cold, slimy snake on his face, and Publius asked, "Where is Mucius?" And looking around in surprise, there was no sign of Mucius. It was already dark, and the streets were almost deserted. A gust of wind whipped up a billow of dust in front of them. Thunder boomed in the distance. I don't understand that," Julia said uneasily. Where can he be?" "Probably he ran first, before we did, and went right on home," Publius said. "That isn't like him," said Julius. "He's never been the first to run away. And besides, he has our money with him." "He thought maybe we would fool around and he wouldn't get home on time," Flavius said. His father's very strict with him about that." This seemed convincing, but the others still felt weird about Mucius's absence. However, they did not have time to think much more about it. A brilliant streak of lightning flashed across the sky, followed by ear-splitting thunder. Immediately afterward, a fearful shower of hail began pounding down upon them. "We'd better get home," Publius shouted, and he tucked up his toga and began running with great leaps down the street. The others followed him at top speed. Where is Mucius? Well, you'll have to tune in next time, because that's the end of chapter 11. See you later.